My parents uninvited me from Thanksgiving dinner. When I asked why, my mother scoffed and said my brother was bringing his new high-class girlfriend to meet the family, and he did not want me there because my blue-collar job would embarrass him. I just said quietly, "I understand." 5 days later, they showed up at my door furious after finding out the truth. My brother's new girlfriend was my VIP client, my closest friend, and the only person who knew exactly who I really was. My name is Valerie, and I am 33 years old. I grew up in a family where love was always conditional, measured only by status, wealth, and how good you made my parents look to their country club friends. Before I dive into how I completely dismantled my family's house of lies, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep of your family and had to build your own success from the ground up. It was a brisk Tuesday morning in November, just a week before Thanksgiving. I was standing in the supply room of a commercial building wearing hazard coveralls splattered with industrial paint and solvents. I had spent the last 3 hours overseeing the cleanup of a stubborn chemical spill in the parking garage. The sharp scent of bleach clung to my clothes. My hands were calloused from hard labor, and my muscles ached with a familiar exhaustion. Most people would look at me and see nothing but a tired janitor scrubbing floors for minimum wage. For a long time, that was exactly what my family believed I was. They thought I was a high school graduate who never made anything of herself, stuck cleaning up other people's messes, while my younger brother Spencer climbed the corporate ladder. I wiped the sweat from my forehead when my phone started vibrating in my pocket. The caller ID flashed my mother's name, Brenda. I sighed, bracing myself for the usual passive-aggressive comments, and answered. "Valerie," my mother began, her voice dripping with sweetness. "I am calling about Thanksgiving next Thursday." I smiled slightly, wiping down a steel counter. "What time should I come over?" I asked her politely. "I already bought the organic turkey you wanted." There was a long pause on the line, the exact kind of heavy silence that usually preceded a devastating blow. "Well, that is the thing," she said, her tone shifting instantly to something cold and defensive. "Your brother Spencer is bringing his new girlfriend to meet the family. Her name is Maya, and she is incredibly successful. She is a top executive in real estate, very sophisticated, very high class. Spencer just got a promotion at his firm, and he really wants to make a perfect impression on her." I stood still, waiting, knowing exactly where this conversation was heading, and I prompted her calmly, and my mother sighed heavily. "Spencer feels it would be best if you did not attend dinner this year. He does not want to explain to a woman of Maya's caliber why his sister is a toilet scrubber. He feels your blue-collar job would embarrass him. We need to project an image of elite success, Valerie. You understand, right? It is just for 1 year. You would not fit in with us anyway." The audacity of her words washed over me, but I did not shed a single tear. I had stopped crying over my family's cruelty a long time ago. Before I could even formulate a response, I heard my father Thomas snatch the phone roughly from my mother's hands. "Valerie, listen to me." My father barked, his voice loud and dripping with authority. "We are already stressed enough trying to prepare the house for this girl. You are still cooking the turkey. We expect it brined, roasted, and delivered to the house by 10 in the morning on Thursday. But do not ring the doorbell. Just leave the roasting pan on the back porch like a delivery driver. We cannot risk Maya arriving early and seeing you standing on our doorstep looking like a vagrant in your dirty work clothes. Do not make this difficult. Just do your part for the family for once in your miserable life." I stood there in the fluorescent lighting of the supply room, staring blankly at a mop bucket. My own parents were banning me from the holiday table because my brother was ashamed of my job, yet they still felt entirely entitled to my free labor. They wanted me to be their unseen servant, dropping off a gourmet meal at the back door like a delivery person, so they could play pretend in front of a wealthy stranger. They expected me to beg, to cry, to apologize for being a disappointment. Instead, I let out a soft, genuine laugh that echoed off the concrete walls. It was a laugh born not from heartbreak, but from the absolute certainty of what was about to happen next. "I understand completely," I said, making sure my voice was smooth and calm. "I will make sure the turkey is dropped off at the back porch exactly as you asked. Enjoy your Thanksgiving dinner with Maya. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. My family thought they had just banished the ultimate embarrassment from their perfect holiday. They had no idea they had just sealed their own fate, nor did they realize that the high-class girlfriend they were so desperate to impress was someone I knew very well. I unzipped my hazard coveralls, stepping out of the dirty uniform to reveal the tailored suit I wore underneath. It was time to get back to work, not as the janitor my family thought I was, but as the woman who was about to tear their fake empire down to the ground. I stepped out of the service elevator and walked down the pristine glass corridor toward the executive suites. The transition from the harsh fluorescent lights of the maintenance garage to the soft, natural sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corporate level always gave me a quiet sense of satisfaction. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, interrupting the momentary peace. I pulled it out, fully expecting another list of outrageous demands from my mother regarding the Thanksgiving turkey. Instead, the screen illuminated with a text message from my younger brother Spencer. The golden child himself was gracing me with his attention. I unlocked the screen and read the message. Valerie, Mom said you picked up some extra night shifts at whatever cleaning company you work for. I need you to transfer $500 to my account right now. Maya is used to a certain lifestyle, and I need to buy a vintage bottle of wine for her parents to prove I belong in her world. Do not make me ask twice. I stopped walking, staring at the screen in pure disbelief. Spencer was a junior executive at a struggling real estate firm, drowning in debt from financing his luxury car and designer suits. Yet he still possessed the sheer audacity to demand money from the sister he had just banned from the family holiday table. He genuinely believed that my hard-earned money, which he thought came from scrubbing toilets on the night shift, should be handed over to fund his pathetic illusion of wealth. I typed a quick, firm response. Spencer, you and Mom just uninvited me from Thanksgiving dinner because my job embarrasses you. I am not funding your lies or buying wine for a woman you are deceiving. Figure it out yourself. I hit send and resumed my walk toward my office. I barely took 5 steps before my phone chimed rapidly with 3 back-to-back messages. The rapid-fire notification sound was Spencer's signature move whenever anyone dared to tell him no. I opened the messages and the temperature in my veins dropped to absolute zero. You are making a huge mistake, Valerie, the first text read. The second followed immediately. Maya thinks my family is flawless. I told her my sister is a high school dropout who struggles with addiction and theft. She feels sorry for me. Then came the third message, the extortion attempt. Send the $500 right now. If you do not, I will tell Maya the truth about why you really got kicked out of the house. I will tell her you stole my college tuition money. Do you really want her knowing you are a thief? I stopped dead in my tracks, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sheer venom of his threat transported me straight back to the most agonizing moment of my life. 10 years ago, my parents had saved $5,000 for my final semester of college. I had worked 2 jobs to cover the rest of my living expenses, but 1 week before tuition was due, the cash vanished from the family safe. I knew exactly who took it. Spencer had accumulated massive gambling debts from an illegal sports betting ring at his university fraternity. The men he owed were threatening to break his legs. Desperate and cowardly, Spencer stole the $5,000 to save his own skin. But he did not just take the money. He planted the empty bank envelopes under my mattress and tearfully confessed to our parents that he had seen me taking cash to buy illegal drugs. They believed him without a second of hesitation. My mother slapped me across the face, calling me a criminal and a national disgrace. My father dragged my suitcases to the front lawn and locked the heavy oak door. They refused to look at my clean medical tests, refused to check Spencer's bank records, and refused to listen to a single word of my desperate defense. They needed Spencer to remain perfect, which meant I had to be the permanent villain. That brutal betrayal forced me to drop out of college, live in a cheap roadside motel, and take a grueling job cleaning commercial offices just to survive the brutal winter. Now, a full decade later, Spencer was weaponizing his own crime against me, threatening to poison the mind of a woman he desperately wanted to impress. He was banking on the arrogant assumption that I was still that terrified, helpless 22-year-old girl who would empty her meager bank account to avoid further conflict. He thought fear would always control me. He was completely wrong. Anger did not cloud my judgment today. It sharpened it into a lethal weapon. I walked into my private office, a sprawling corner suite with panoramic views of the bustling city skyline. I tossed my phone onto the polished mahogany desk and booted up my computer. I opened my personal banking application, navigating to the quick transfer menu where Spencer's account information was still saved from years ago when my parents forced me to help pay his phone bills. I typed in the transfer amount. Not $500, not $50. I typed in exactly $5. Then I moved to the transaction memo line. This was the notification that would pop up directly on his phone screen. I kept my expression perfectly neutral as my fingers flew across the keyboard, crafting a message that was chillingly polite and entirely unyielding. Here is $5, I typed out carefully. Buy yourself a cheap cup of hot coffee. You're going to need the caffeine to keep up with all those massive lies. Good luck with Maya today. You are really going to need it. I clicked confirm, silencing my cellular phone immediately. He had absolutely no idea in the world that Maya was currently waiting patiently inside my beautiful corporate lobby. I set my phone face down on the polished mahogany desk and let out a long, slow breath. The transaction was complete, but the lingering sting of Spencer's threats hung in the air. I walked toward the private adjoining bathroom in my executive suite. The mirror above the marble sink reflected a woman caught between two distinct worlds. Half of me was still clad in the heavy paint-splattered hazard coveralls I wore to oversee the chemical cleanup in the parking garage. That was the exact version of me my family desperately wanted to believe in. The broken, exhausted laborer they could look down upon from their precarious suburban pedestal. I reached for the zipper at my collar and pulled it down, shedding the thick industrial fabric entirely. Underneath, I wore a crisp white silk blouse and tailored black trousers. I washed the faint smell of bleach from my hands, applied a fresh coat of red lipstick, and slipped into the structured designer blazer hanging on the back of the solid oak door. The physical transformation was finally complete. I was no longer the tragic outcast they fabricated in their twisted minds. I stepped out of the bathroom and walked across the plush carpets of my office, a space that commanded panoramic views of the entire downtown financial district. This was the beating heart of Vanguard Facility Solutions. 10 years ago, my parents had locked me out of their house with nothing but a single suitcase and a broken spirit. I spent my first winter sleeping in a freezing motel room, taking night shifts cleaning commercial office buildings just to buy cheap groceries. I scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans while my brother blew through the tuition money he stole from me. But I did not just clean those buildings, I studied them. I learned how the management companies operated and how they overcharged corporate clients for mediocre services. I saved every single dollar, registered my own limited liability company, and started bidding on small contracts. Today, Vanguard Facility Solutions was a $60 million commercial property management empire. We held exclusive maintenance, security, and facility operations contracts for over 40 of the prestigious high-rise buildings in the city. The same corporate towers my parents walked past with reverence were literally kept running by my workforce. I employed over 800 people, provided full health benefits, and built a corporate culture based on the exact opposite of the toxic environment I grew up in. My family loved to call me a toilet scrubber, twisting the hard, honest work I did in my early 20s into a permanent label of shame. They clung to that derogatory narrative because acknowledging my actual trajectory would require them to admit they had thrown away a highly successful daughter to protect a lying, parasitic son. I opened the heavy glass door of my private suite and stepped out onto the main executive floor. The energy of the corporate headquarters buzzed around me. Analysts were reviewing budget forecasts on massive digital displays, while operations managers coordinated dispatch routes for our commercial fleets. Account executives were taking calls from prominent real estate firms. As I walked down the gleaming corridor, conversations momentarily paused. Employees nodded respectfully, greeting me with warm smiles and addressing me by my title. Good morning, Valerie. Excellent work on the downtown acquisition, boss. I returned their greetings feeling a deep, resonating sense of pride. This was my sanctuary. This was the impregnable fortress I had constructed from the rubble of my family's utter betrayal. Every step I took across the imported Italian marble floors felt like a quiet victory over the lies Spencer was currently feeding his wealthy girlfriend. Spencer desperately needed Maya to believe he was a high society prince forced to deal with a delinquent drug-addicted sister to hide his massive financial failures. My parents eagerly backed up his delusions, enabling his narcissism, because facing the truth about their golden child would shatter their fragile egos. They genuinely believed that by barring me from their Thanksgiving table, they were protecting their elite image from my dirty hands. The irony was so sharp it almost tasted like copper. I was the very elite they were hopelessly trying to impress. I paused near the glass railing, overlooking the two-story atrium of our corporate lobby. Down below, visitors checked in at the sleek reception desk, flanked by modern art installations and security personnel in sharp uniforms. This entire building belonged to me. The very ground my family thought I was unworthy to walk on was owned, operated, and secured by the empire I had forged. The brutal truth was that my family was drowning in debt to maintain a facade while I possessed the capital to buy their entire neighborhood outright. My father was still paying off the second mortgage on his house, and my brother was begging his sister for a $5 handout to buy a bottle of wine. They wanted me to drop off a cooked turkey at the back porch like a nameless delivery driver so they could take credit for my labor. They wanted me to stay hidden in the shadows, a convenient scapegoat to blame for all their anxieties and failures. But the shadows were where I had built my true strength. I spent a decade operating in the background, acquiring valuable assets, expanding lucrative territories, and becoming an undeniable titan in an industry they viewed with absolute disdain. They thought they were locking me out of their prestigious inner circle, completely oblivious to the fact that I was the one holding the keys to the city. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer and took a steadying breath. The emotional weight of Spencer's pathetic extortion attempt was dissipating rapidly, replaced by the cold, calculated mindset of a chief executive officer. It was finally time to descend to the lobby and greet my most lucrative client, who was also my best friend. As I turned toward the glass doors of my executive suite to head to the lobby, my assistant Marcus stepped into the room. He was carrying a thick red folder, his expression tight with professional urgency. I paused. If he was intercepting me now, it meant something required my immediate authorization. Valerie. I apologize for the interruption, Marcus said, holding out the red folder. The accounting department flagged a critical vendor issue that needs your direct signature before the holiday weekend begins. I took the folder and walked back to my desk. What are we looking at? I asked, flipping open the cover. Marcus said. Regarding Sterling Heritage Properties. They manage commercial buildings where we hold exclusive facility operations contracts. They are currently 60 days delinquent on their accounts payable. Their chief financial officer has been dodging our billing department for weeks, but this morning a junior executive sent over an emergency request. They are begging for a 90-day contract extension and a complete waiver of all accumulated late fees. I looked down at the documents illuminated by the bright sunlight streaming through my office windows. My eyes scanned the detailed financial breakdowns, the outstanding invoice totals, and the desperate corporate letterhead pleading for leniency due to unforeseen market fluctuations. Then my gaze dropped to the bottom of the page. There, scrawled in bold blue ink, was the signature of the junior executive attempting to negotiate this financial lifeline. Spencer Vance. My own brother. I stared at the signature, a sharp, bitter amusement rising in my chest. Spencer worked for Sterling Heritage Properties. My parents had boasted about his prestigious real estate job for years, acting as if he was brokering billion-dollar deals and reshaping the city skyline. They constantly rubbed his fabricated success in my face, using his fancy job title as proof of his superiority. The brutal reality laid out in black and white on my desk was completely different. His firm was bleeding money, drowning in inescapable corporate debt, and utterly failing to pay the very people who kept their buildings functioning. And the junior executive tasked with desperately saving their maintenance contracts was my brother. He was currently demanding a $5 handout from me to buy wine, while simultaneously begging my company for a 90-day grace period to save his crumbling career. The sheer hypocrisy was staggering. Spencer was willing to extort his sister to maintain an illusion of wealth for his new girlfriend, completely oblivious to the fact that his professional survival depended entirely on the mercy of my corporation. He had absolutely no idea that the chief executive officer reviewing his desperate plea was the same woman he had just banned from the family Thanksgiving table. Marcus stood patiently waiting for my directive. Usually we offer a 30-day grace period for legacy clients during the holidays, Marcus noted professionally. But given their severe delinquency and the sheer volume of ignored communication from their accounting team, the finance directors want to know how aggressive you want to be. Should we approve the extension or initiate the penalty protocols? I did not hesitate for a single second. I reached across my desk, picked up my heavy gold fountain pen, and uncapped it with a sharp, decisive click. Deny the extension request entirely, I stated, my voice echoing with absolute authority. Execute the default clause on all 3 of their commercial properties immediately. Apply the maximum late fee penalties permitted under our service agreement. I pressed the pen to the thick paper, drawing a firm, heavy line straight through Spencer's desperate request for a waiver. I want a formal notice of termination drafted and sent to their chief executive officer by the end of the business day. Inform them that if the entire outstanding balance, including all newly applied penalties, is not paid in full within 30 days, Vanguard Facility Solutions will pull every single maintenance worker, security guard, and technician from their buildings. We will leave their properties completely unserviced, and we will initiate aggressive litigation to recover our assets. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the absolute zero-tolerance policy, but he nodded firmly. Understood. I will have the legal team draft the termination notice right away. They are going to panic when they see the penalty totals. Let them panic, I replied coldly, closing the red folder and handing it back to him. Business is business. If Sterling Heritage Properties cannot afford to pay their operational invoices, they have no right to occupy that commercial space. We do not run a charity for incompetent executives who prioritize their lifestyle over their corporate responsibilities. No grace periods, no exceptions. Marcus took the folder and offered a sharp nod of respect before turning and walking out of the executive suite. I watched the heavy glass door swing shut behind Marcus, leaving me alone in the quiet luxury of my office. My parents had spent my entire adult life convincing themselves that I was a worthless failure, a stain on their pristine reputation. They had protected Spencer at every single turn, enabling his terrible financial habits and celebrating his hollow achievements as if he were a genius. Now the harsh reality of the real world was finally crashing down on their precious golden child. And I was the exact person who had just issued the official order to push him over the edge. I had spent a decade building an impenetrable fortress of financial security and corporate power. My family had demanded that I remain a victim, a silent scapegoat they could endlessly punish. Instead, I became their landlord, their creditor, and the architect of their impending destruction. The turkey they demanded I cook would be the last meal they ate in peace. I turned away from my reflection, grabbed my security badge, and headed straight for the private elevator. It was finally time to descend to the main lobby. My most important client was patiently waiting for me. The private elevator descended smoothly, depositing me into the expansive main lobby of Vanguard Facility Solutions. The morning sunlight caught the polished glass and steel architecture, but my attention was immediately drawn to the woman standing near the central reception desk. Maya was impossible to ignore. At 30 years old, she possessed the kind of effortless, commanding presence that forced entire boardrooms to pay attention. As an African American woman who had conquered the notoriously cutthroat commercial real estate development sector, she wore her power with absolute grace. Today, she was dressed in a stunning tailored emerald green suit that perfectly complemented her warm brown skin. She was holding a tablet, rapidly typing out instructions to her own team, completely unbothered by the bustling corporate environment around her. Maya was not just my most lucrative corporate client. She was my closest friend, my fiercest ally, and the only person in this entire city who knew the complete unfiltered truth about my past. I walked across the lobby, my heels clicking rhythmically against the Italian marble floor. Maya glanced up from her screen, her sharp, focused expression instantly melting into a brilliant, genuine smile. "Valerie," she said, stepping forward to pull me into a tight, warm hug. "You look like you are ready to conquer a small country this morning." I laughed, returning the embrace with equal warmth. "I just might," I replied smoothly. "But first, we need to finalize the operational logistics for your new downtown high-rise project." Maya nodded, her demeanor shifting seamlessly back into the brilliant executive I deeply respected. We walked together toward the private VIP executive lounge, located just off the main lobby, bypassing the standard conference rooms. The heavy frosted glass doors slid shut behind us, completely sealing out the noise of the corporate headquarters. We settled into the plush leather armchairs facing the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya slid a thick-bound portfolio across the polished glass table. "The Horizon Tower is completely on schedule for the grand opening next month," she stated, tapping the cover of the portfolio. "My investors are demanding flawless execution. I need Vanguard Facility Solutions to handle the entire building portfolio: security, deep cleaning, preventive maintenance, and emergency response teams. We are talking about a multi-million-dollar annual contract, Valerie. I need your absolute best people on the ground." I opened the portfolio quickly, scanning the aggressive timelines and stringent operational requirements. "You already know I do not deploy anything less than my best," I assured her, meeting her gaze with unwavering confidence. "I have already drafted the initial resource allocation plan. Vanguard will dedicate a specialized task force entirely to the Horizon Tower. You will have round-the-clock security monitoring and an elite maintenance crew stationed on site 24 hours a day. We will ensure your grand opening is completely spotless." Maya leaned back in her chair, a look of profound relief washing over her face. "This is exactly why I only do business with you, Valerie. You actually deliver on your promises." I signed the final approval documents, pushing them back across the table. Our professional relationship had always been built on this bedrock of mutual competence. We were two young women who had fought our way to the top of male-dominated industries, and we recognized that same relentless drive in each other. With the multi-million-dollar contract officially secured, the high-stakes corporate energy in the room began to dissipate. The heavy armor of executive leadership slowly melted away, leaving just two close friends seeking a momentary escape from their grueling schedules. I stood up and walked over to the private espresso machine nestled in the corner of the lounge. "How do you take it today?" I asked, pulling two ceramic cups from the warming rack. "Double shot black," Maya answered, letting out a long, heavy sigh that sounded entirely out of character for her. "Actually, make it a triple. I need all the liquid courage I can legally consume right now." I raised an eyebrow, pouring the dark espresso into the cups. "That sounds like a remarkably specific type of exhaustion. Are the Horizon investors giving you a headache again?" I handed her the steaming cup and sat back down across from her. Maya took a slow sip of the coffee, shaking her head. "No, the investors are fine. The business is running perfectly. It is my personal life that is currently making me want to pull my own hair out." She placed the ceramic cup on the glass table and rubbed her temples. "It is Thanksgiving next week," she continued, her voice laced with genuine dread. "And I am supposed to spend the entire holiday weekend meeting the family of my boyfriend for the very first time. We have been dating for 6 months now, and he insists that this is the perfect moment for the grand family introduction." I smiled sympathetically, taking a sip of my own coffee. "Meeting the parents is always a massive hurdle," I offered. "But you negotiate with aggressive real estate tycoons before breakfast. A simple holiday dinner should be a walk in the park for you. Maya let out a harsh, cynical laugh. You would think so, right? But this is not just a normal holiday dinner. His family is incredibly wealthy, or at least they act like they are royalty. They live in this massive house in the suburbs and spend their entire lives obsessing over country club status and social appearances. My boyfriend has spent the last month giving me a strict list of rules about what to wear, what topics to avoid, and how to impress his elitist parents. I leaned forward, my protective instincts flaring up. He is giving you rules on how to behave. I asked, my tone sharpening. If they cannot see how incredible you are, that is their catastrophic loss. Maya offered a weak smile before shaking her head. I know, she whispered softly. But it is not just the ridiculous dress codes or the pressure to perform for his parents. Maya continued swirling the dark liquid in her cup. It is the way he talks about people who do not fit into his perfect little bubble. We were having dinner last night and he finally opened up about his family dynamics. He told me a story that honestly made my stomach turn. I am starting to see a side of him that I really do not like, Valerie. I leaned back in my chair, giving her my full attention. What did he say? I asked softly. He told me about his older sister Maya, said, her expression twisting with genuine disgust. Apparently she is the dark, shameful secret of their pristine family. He claims she is a high school dropout with severe addiction issues. He told me this entire sob story about how she ruined their family reputation, how she was completely unhinged, and how they eventually had to cut her off for their own safety. But Valerie, it was not the story itself that bothered me. Families have complicated histories. I get that. It was the absolute lack of empathy in his voice. He sounded so smug, so incredibly cruel when he talked about her. My grip on my coffee cup tightened fractionally, but I kept my face perfectly composed. Cruel, how I prompted. Maya shook her head, leaning forward as if sharing a disturbing secret. He actually laughed when he told me what she does for a living now. He said she is a miserable toilet scrubber working night shifts at some random cleaning company. He used those exact words, Valerie. A toilet scrubber. I was sitting across from him looking at this man I have been dating for 6 months, and I felt physically sick. I build commercial properties for a living. I know exactly how hard maintenance and sanitation teams work. They are the backbone of my entire industry. And here is my boyfriend sitting in a fancy restaurant mocking his own flesh and blood for doing honest, hard labor. A cold, familiar sensation began to pool in the pit of my stomach. The details were incredibly specific, but I told myself it could just be a bizarre coincidence. There are plenty of arrogant men in this city with estranged siblings. I took a slow, measured sip of my espresso. Did he tell you why they estranged her? I asked, keeping my tone carefully neutral. Yes, Maya said, her eyes flashing with lingering anger. He claimed that right before his final semester of college, she stole $5,000 directly from their family safe. He said she took his tuition money to buy drugs and planted empty bank envelopes in her own room to somehow play the victim. According to him, his parents caught her red-handed, dragged her suitcases out to the front lawn, and locked her out in the freezing cold. He told me this story like he was the tragic hero who overcame incredible adversity, but all I could think about was how heartless a family must be to throw their own daughter out into the winter streets without a second thought. The air in the VIP lounge suddenly felt unnaturally thin. My heartbeat drummed a steady, deafening rhythm in my ears. The stolen tuition money, the $5,000, the empty bank envelopes, the front lawn in the dead of winter. It was not a coincidence. It was my life. It was the exact fabricated narrative that had destroyed my 20s, being fed to my best friend by the very brother who orchestrated the entire lie. Maya did not notice my internal shock. She was too wrapped up in her own righteous indignation, pacing her words with mounting frustration. And it gets worse, she continued, setting her cup down with a sharp clink against the glass table. He told me that his parents actually forced his sister to cook their entire Thanksgiving meal this year. But because they are so desperately ashamed of her blue-collar job, his father demanded that she drop the food off at the back porch like a nameless delivery driver. They explicitly banned her from attending the dinner because they do not want her dirty presence ruining their elite image in front of me. They want me to think they are this flawless high society family. I sat perfectly still. The hazard coveralls I had taken off just 20 minutes ago felt like a ghost haunting the room. The $5 transfer I had just sent, the text messages threatening to expose me as a thief. It all locked together with terrifying precision. Maya rubbed her forehead, her voice dropping to a weary whisper. I do not even know what to do, Valerie. He talks about his parents Thomas and Brenda like they are royalty. He says his father is a titan of industry, and his mother is a country club queen. But from everything he has accidentally revealed, they sound like absolute monsters. I am supposed to sit at their fancy dining table next Thursday, eat the food cooked by the sister they banished, and smile like I do not know how toxic they really are. I am honestly thinking about canceling the whole trip and breaking up with him today. I cannot marry into a family that treats their own daughter like disposable trash just to protect their fragile egos. Every single detail had clicked into place. Thomas and Brenda, the Thanksgiving turkey on the back porch, the $5,000 tuition theft, the 6-month relationship. Spencer had brought the woman he wanted to impress straight into the heart of my empire without even realizing it. He was attempting to build his pristine future on the foundation of my destroyed past, completely oblivious to the fact that his wealthy, sophisticated girlfriend was sitting in my private corporate lounge, drinking my espresso and expressing her absolute revulsion for the man he truly was. I took one final sip of my coffee, feeling an exhilarating sense of clarity. The universe had just handed me the ultimate weapon to destroy his meticulously crafted illusion, and it had delivered that weapon directly to my coffee table. I looked at Maya, my brilliant friend, agonizing over a man whose existence was a constructed mirage. She sat, hands wrapped tightly around her cup, distressed by the cruelty she unknowingly walked into. The universe had an incredible sense of humor, placing the orchestrator of my family's downfall right in my executive lounge. I placed my ceramic cup on the glass table with a deliberate clink. The sound pulled Maya out of her frustrated spiral. She looked up, expecting standard relationship advice. Instead, I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. Maya, I said, my voice perfectly level, maintaining the steady cadence of a woman who was entirely in control. What is your boyfriend's last name? She blinked clearly, thrown by the sudden shift in my tone. Vance. She answered, her brow furrowing in confusion. Spencer Vance. Why? Do you know his firm? I know his firm, I replied smoothly. Sterling Heritage Properties. They are 60 days delinquent on their accounts payable with my company. Spencer sent a desperate email this morning begging my accounting department for a 90-day extension to save his job. Maya's mouth parted in surprise, but before she could process that, I continued. I also know his father Thomas is not a titan of industry. He is a mid-level manager drowning under a second mortgage taken out to fund Spencer's lavish lifestyle. And his mother Brenda is not a country club queen. She spends her days crafting a fake reality to mask her own insecurities. The confusion on Maya's face was rapidly transforming into genuine alarm. She set her cup down next to mine, her posture stiffening. Valerie, how could you possibly know all of those specific details about his parents? I never mentioned his last name or where his dad worked. I held her gaze before delivering the truth. Because I know exactly what kind of turkey Brenda demanded for Thanksgiving. She wants an organic bird roasted with a truffle butter glaze and dropped off on her back porch no later than 10 in the morning so she can pretend Spencer cooked it himself. Maya stopped breathing. Her eyes widened, scanning my face for a punchline to an unsettling joke. Her brilliant mind, which flawlessly navigated multi-million-dollar acquisitions, rapidly connected the impossible dots. She remembered the story she just told me. She remembered the names. She remembered the description of the estranged blue-collar sister. Valerie, Maya whispered, her voice dropping to a raw, breathless pitch. No. Tell me you are making a bizarre joke right now. Tell me this is not what it sounds like. I am the dark, shameful secret of the Vance family. I said, my voice entirely devoid of shame or hesitation. I am the high school dropout. I am the alleged drug addict. I am the sister who supposedly stole $5,000 from the family safe, and I am the miserable toilet scrubber working night shifts who just got banned from her own family's holiday dinner. Maya fell back against the leather armchair as if she had been physically struck. The shock radiating from her was palpable. She stared at me, then looked around the luxurious sunlit VIP lounge of the $60 million corporate headquarters I had built from the ground up. The sheer magnitude of Spencer's lie was crashing down on her all at once. He stole the tuition money. I continued, making sure every word landed with absolute precision. He racked up illegal gambling debts at his fraternity, stole the cash to save himself, and planted the empty envelopes in my room. My parents threw me out into the snow without a coat. I slept in a motel and took a job cleaning commercial buildings to survive. That is how I learned this industry. That is how I eventually built Vanguard Facility Solutions. While Spencer was feeding you a sob story to make himself look like a tragic hero, I was building the empire that is currently keeping his failing real estate firm from going bankrupt. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant muffled hum of the corporate office outside our glass doors. I watched a myriad of emotions cross Maya's face. Shock, disbelief, disgust, and then slowly, a cold, terrifying fury. The kind of fury that only a highly intelligent, fiercely loyal woman experiences when she realizes a mediocre man has attempted to play her for a fool. He sat across from me. Maya said, her voice shaking with a dangerous, quiet rage. He looked me dead in the eye, drank a $300 bottle of wine that I paid for, and mocked you. He mocked my best friend. He called you a piece of disposable trash. He thinks I am weak, I replied simply. He thinks I am still the terrified 22-year-old girl who will do whatever they say to avoid conflict. He just texted me 20 minutes ago demanding I send him $500 to buy a gift for your parents, threatening to tell you that I am a thief if I refused. Maya's eyes snapped up to meet mine, blazing with absolute venom. He tried to extort you using my name. I sent him $5, I said, a dark smile finally breaking across my face, and told him to buy a cheap cup of coffee. A sharp, predatory laugh escaped Maya's lips. The initial shock had entirely evaporated, replaced by a fierce, unspoken alliance. The bond we shared as professional women had just forged into something unbreakable. She reached across the glass table and grabbed my hands, her grip ironclad. "Valerie," she said, her voice dropping to a lethal, determined register. "I was going to dump him today. I was going to send a text block his number and walk away from this entire pathetic circus right now. And now I asked, already knowing the answer." Maya leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine, gleaming with the promise of absolute destruction. "Now we are going to Thanksgiving dinner. Now we are going to Thanksgiving dinner." I looked at the fierce determination burning in Maya's dark eyes and felt a genuine thrill of anticipation. We were no longer just a chief executive officer and a real estate developer having coffee. We were the architects of a complete domestic demolition. I walked over to the digital smartboard mounted on the wall of the executive lounge and tapped the screen to wake it up. "If we are going to do this," I stated, bringing up a blank digital whiteboard, "we do it with the exact same precision we use for corporate acquisitions. We leave absolutely no room for error, no plausible deniability, and no avenue of escape for any of them." Maya stood up, smoothing the front of her emerald green suit, and joined me at the board. She grabbed a digital stylus, her business instincts taking over immediately. "Spencer thinks he is bringing a naive, wealthy woman into his territory to impress his elitist parents," she said, drawing a quick timeline on the screen. "He wants to use me as a prop to validate his fake success. We are going to let him believe the illusion is working perfectly until the very last second." I nodded, mapping out the geography of my parents' house in my mind. "They live in a sprawling suburban house that looks incredibly impressive from the curb," I explained. "But the truth is they are drowning under a massive second mortgage. They will undoubtedly pull out the expensive crystal glasses, pour wine they cannot afford, and pretend to be upper-crust society. They will try to dazzle you with stories about Spencer's fabricated corporate victories." Maya smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that promised absolute ruin. "I will play the part flawlessly," she assured me. "I will be the charming, impressed girlfriend. I will praise his achievements, admire their beautiful home, and stroke their fragile egos until they are overflowing with arrogance. And then I will ask them about their other child. I will act curious about the sister Spencer mentioned. I paused, considering the emotional weight of what they would say. They will not hold back, I warned her. They will call me every terrible name in the book. They will call me a thief, a drug addict, and a disgrace. They will tell you that I am scrubbing toilets because I threw my life away. I know exactly how vile they can be. Maya reached out and squeezed my shoulder. I know they will be vicious, Valerie, but I will have my phone sitting face down on the dining table recording every single syllable that comes out of their mouths. I am going to let them dig their own graves with their own words. But we need a trigger, a specific moment when the trap snaps shut. I turned back to the smartboard. The turkey, I said, a cold realization settling into place. My father explicitly ordered me to cook their Thanksgiving turkey and leave it on the back porch by 10 in the morning like a delivery driver. He specifically commanded me not to ring the doorbell because he is terrified you might see me in my work clothes. Maya let out a breath of disbelief. He actually wants you to cater his dinner while banning you from the table. Yes, I confirmed. So we give them exactly what they asked for, but I am not cooking it. I am going to order a custom roasted turkey from a Michelin-starred chef downtown. I will have it delivered to the back porch perfectly on time. They will claim Spencer cooked it to prove their sophisticated domestic skills. Maya began writing action items on the board. Okay, I arrive at 2 in the afternoon. We sit down for dinner at 4. I endure the small talk, bait them into insulting you, and capture the audio evidence. But how do we deliver the final blow? I want them to look you in the eye when their world ends. I smiled, pulling my personal phone from my pocket. We synchronize our timelines. I will not be standing outside in the cold. I will be sitting in the comfort of my luxury penthouse downtown, surrounded by my closest friends and loyal employees who actually support me. We set up a private video link. You keep your phone on the table. When Spencer stands up to give his inevitable self-congratulatory toast, you activate the video feed and cast my face directly onto their smart television in the dining room. Maya laughed a bright, triumphant sound. It is absolutely brilliant, she declared. I will connect my phone to their television system under the guise of showing photos of my latest project. When Spencer raises his glass to celebrate his fake success, I will mirror the screen. They will be forced to stare at the very woman they banished. I reviewed the timeline, making sure every detail was ironclad. We must set the legal trap concurrently, I added. During dinner, my accounting department will finalize the termination notices for Sterling Heritage Properties. My investment division will quietly purchase the bad debt on my parents' second mortgage. When Thanksgiving dinner ends, I will not just be the sister they ostracized. I will be their literal landlord and the executioner of Spencer's career. We spent the next hour refining the strategy, anticipating every excuse they might use. Maya memorized the details of my parents' financial woes so she could drop them into the conversation, watching the panic set in before the final reveal. We coordinated our signals, deciding on a single emoji Maya would text me before activating the live video stream. When we stepped away from the smartboard, the master plan was flawless. There were no loopholes. There was no room for them to manipulate the narrative. They spent a decade treating me like a shameful secret. Next Thursday, I was going to drag them all straight into the blinding light. The following Thursday, the crisp November air carried the scent of wood smoke across the manicured lawns of my parents' suburban neighborhood. Maya arrived at the house promptly at 2 in the afternoon, pulling her sleek black luxury sedan into the circular driveway. She stepped out wearing a stunning cashmere coat that screamed quiet wealth, playing the part of the elite girlfriend to absolute perfection. She had a hidden earpiece tucked beneath her dark hair, keeping a live audio connection open to me as I sat comfortably in my downtown penthouse. I listened intently as the final act of my family's pathetic masquerade began to unfold. From the curb, the sprawling colonial house looked exactly like the portrait of high society success my parents desperately wanted to project. Massive autumn wreaths adorned the double front doors, and expensive seasonal arrangements lined the pristine walkway. But Maya was a top-tier commercial real estate developer. Her trained eye instantly saw right through the cheap cosmetic illusions. As she walked up the driveway, she noted the uneven, patchy shingle work on the roof that indicated years of deferred maintenance. She saw the heavy layer of fresh mulch hastily dumped over dying bushes to hide the neglected landscaping. My parents had clearly spent their last available credit limit on temporary holiday decorations to mask a crumbling foundation. Before Maya could even reach the porch, the front door swung open. Spencer emerged wearing a tailored suit that I knew for a fact he could not afford. He flashed his signature charismatic smile, completely unaware that he was welcoming his own executioner into his home. "Maya, you look absolutely breathtaking," he said, pulling her into a practiced embrace. "My parents are so incredibly excited to finally meet you. They have been preparing all week for this." Maya returned the greeting with a flawless, polite smile. She stepped over the threshold and into the grand foyer, instantly bombarded by the grotesque theater of my family's fake elitism. My mother Brenda descended the curved staircase wearing a designer dress from a past season and a heavy pearl necklace. My father Thomas stood near the entrance to the formal living room, swirling a glass of amber liquid and wearing a velvet smoking jacket. They looked like amateur actors performing a terrible script about wealthy aristocrats. "Maya, darling," my mother exclaimed, extending both hands with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Welcome to our home. Spencer has told us everything about your brilliant real estate acquisitions. It is so refreshing to finally have someone of your elite caliber join our family table." My father stepped forward, offering a firm, overly confident handshake. "Thomas Vance," he announced, puffing out his chest. "Please make yourself entirely at home. We are thrilled to host a woman who truly understands the demands of the high-stakes corporate world. It is quite a burden carrying the legacy of a successful family, but we manage." Maya smiled graciously, accepting a crystal glass of wine from Spencer. She thanked them for their hospitality and allowed them to guide her into the formal living room. The space was an aggressive assault of rented luxury. Heavy velvet drapes framed the windows, and a massive, ostentatious centerpiece dominated the coffee table. But as Maya took a seat on the stiff leather sofa, her razor-sharp developer instincts immediately caught the glaring signs of severe financial distress hidden in plain sight. She noticed the slight water damage on the ceiling corner that had been poorly painted over. She saw that the expensive Persian rug was strategically placed to cover deeply scratched and warped hardwood flooring. But the most damning piece of evidence was sitting right on the entryway console table. When Brenda had rushed to greet her, she had hastily shoved a stack of mail behind a decorative silver vase. The edge of the top envelope was clearly visible to Maya. It bore the bold, unmistakable red lettering of a final foreclosure warning from a major national bank. The very same bank my investment division frequently acquired bad debt from. They were putting on a ridiculous pageant of wealth while standing inches away from total financial ruin. Maya sipped her wine, which she instantly recognized as a $15 bottle deceptively poured into an antique crystal decanter. The performance was both pathetic and infuriating. "So, Maya," my father began, leaning against the fireplace mantel in a forced pose of casual wealth. "Spencer tells me you are closing a massive deal downtown. Real estate is a brutal game, but it separates the elite from the bottom feeders. I myself have navigated the corporate waters for decades. It takes a certain pedigree to maintain this level of success." Maya nodded, resting her wineglass on her knee. "It certainly takes a very specific type of strategic vision," she replied, her voice perfectly smooth. "Spencer mentioned that your family has a very prestigious background. It must be wonderful to have such a strong supportive foundation to rely on during economic fluctuations." "Oh, absolutely," my mother chimed in, sitting rigidly on the edge of her armchair. "We pride ourselves on maintaining an impeccable standard. We have always ensured that our family represents only the absolute best. We simply do not tolerate failure or mediocrity in this house. Excellence is in our bloodline." Spencer puffed out his chest, emboldened by his mother's ridiculous claims. "That is exactly what I tell my junior brokers at the firm," he bragged, swirling his cheap wine. "You either have the innate drive to succeed, or you are destined to be a miserable laborer, serving the people who do. I closed 2 massive leasing contracts just last month. It is all about knowing your inherent worth and never associating with people beneath your social class. Maya listened to his blatant lies with a pleasant, encouraging smile. She knew perfectly well that his firm was 60 days delinquent on their maintenance accounts, and that he had literally begged my company for a grace period just days ago. He was sitting in a heavily mortgaged house drinking cheap wine and bragging about deals that did not exist, all while condemning working-class people with absolute disgust. The sheer audacity of their elitism was suffocating. They were desperately attempting to validate their fragile egos by tearing down anyone they deemed inferior. They wanted Maya to believe they were untouchable titans of industry. They wanted her to feel honored just to breathe the same air as the Vance family. Maya leaned forward, her expression shifting into one of polite, intense curiosity. "It is so fascinating to hear about your family values," she said, her voice dripping with hidden intent. "It is clear that you all demand absolute perfection. But Spencer mentioned something else to me recently that I was very curious about. He said he has an older sister." The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. My father's forced smile vanished, and my mother stiffened, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Spencer shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, glancing nervously between Maya and his parents. The trap was finally set, and they were about to walk right into it. "Yes, Spencer has an older sister," Brenda said, recovering her composure with a tight, practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a heavy, tragic burden. "But we rarely speak of her. She is unfortunately the dark mark on our family legacy." Maya shifted her weight on the stiff leather sofa, casually crossing her legs. She slipped her phone from her clutch and rested it face down on her knee, her thumb discreetly pressing the record button on the screen. The audio capture began running silently in the background, feeding the live stream directly to my earpiece back in the penthouse. I sat at my kitchen island, a glass of sparkling water in hand, listening as my mother prepared to weave her intricate web of deceit. "I am so sorry to hear that," Maya offered, projecting absolute innocent sympathy. "Spencer mentioned she had some struggles. It must be incredibly difficult for a family with such high standards to deal with something like that." "Difficult does not even begin to describe it," my father interjected, pouring himself another measure of cheap wine. Thomas leaned heavily against the mantelpiece, shaking his head with exaggerated sorrow. "We gave Valerie every conceivable advantage: private tutors, the best clothing, a fully funded college fund. But some people are just born with a defective moral compass. She was fundamentally lazy, completely lacking the ambition that Spencer possesses." My mother leaned forward, lowering her voice even further, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to absolute perfection. "She fell into a terrible crowd, Maya. Drugs, petty crime, absolute delinquency. We tried interventions. We tried therapy. We threw thousands of dollars at the problem, but she refused to be saved. The final straw came right before her senior year of college." Maya feigned a gasp of shock. "What happened?" Spencer jumped in eagerly, his eyes wide with fake trauma. He was desperate to cement his role as the triumphant survivor. "She stole my college tuition." He lied smoothly without a single ounce of hesitation. $5,000 in cold, hard cash, taken straight from the family safe. She used it to buy illegal substances and tried to frame me by planting the empty bank envelopes in her own room. It was the most traumatic betrayal of my life. I had to take out massive student loans and work double shifts just to finish my degree while she vanished into the streets. Sitting in my penthouse, I let out a sharp, cold laugh. Spencer had not worked a double shift a single day in his miserable life. He had spent his college years partying on my parents' dime while I scrubbed industrial floors to survive the winter they forced me into. Maya tapped a quick, discreet message on her phone screen, under the guise of silencing a notification. "They are practically weeping over his fake trauma," she texted me. I sent back a single flame emoji. "Let them burn." "That is absolutely horrifying," Maya said aloud, her voice dripping with artificial empathy. "How did you all survive such a massive betrayal? I cannot imagine the emotional toll that must have taken on your family." "It nearly broke us," Brenda sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. We had to make the agonizing decision to cut her off entirely. We locked the doors and told her she was no longer welcome in high society. It was tough love, but we had to protect Spencer and his brilliant future. We could not let her toxic presence drag him down. And where is she now? Maya asked innocently. Does she even have a job? Spencer let out a cruel, mocking laugh. If you can call it that. She is a miserable toilet scrubber. She works the graveyard shift at some random cleaning company, emptying trash cans for minimum wage. She completely threw her life away. That is what happens when you lack the elite mindset, Maya. You end up serving the people who actually matter. The sheer magnitude of his arrogance was suffocating. He was sitting in a house heavily mortgaged to pay for his designer suits, mocking the very industry that currently held his professional survival in its hands. My father nodded sagely, taking a sip of his wine. We actually took pity on her this year. We allowed her to cook our Thanksgiving turkey as a way to earn a few extra dollars. We are generous people, Maya. We believe in charity. But we explicitly banned her from attending the dinner today. Banned her. Maya repeated, ensuring the microphone picked up every single syllable. Of course, Brenda said, waving her hand dismissively, we could not possibly have her sitting at this table with you. You are a woman of immense class and success. It would be a catastrophic embarrassment to subject you to her presence. She smells like industrial bleach and failure. We forced her to drop the food off at the back porch like a common delivery driver this morning, so her dirty hands would not taint the holiday. We only surround ourselves with winners. Maya sent me another quick text. The audio is crystal clear. They just handed you the execution warrant. I smiled at the screen, my heart beating with the steady, calm rhythm of absolute certainty. The hypocrisy had officially reached its peak. They were gorging themselves on a gourmet meal I had purchased sitting in a home I essentially owned and bragging about a corporate career I controlled. They had painted themselves as flawless aristocrats while reducing me to a subhuman outcast. Maya locked her phone screen and smiled at my family. Well, she said, shifting to a dangerously cheerful tone. I am relieved you maintain such extremely strict boundaries. It tells me everything I need to know about you. Spencer beamed proudly. Dinner is ready, he announced. Shall we move to the dining room? Maya stood up gracefully. I would gladly do so. I listened through the live audio feed as Maya followed my family into the formal dining room. The heavy scraping of wooden chairs echoing through the earpiece painted a vivid picture of the scene. I knew exactly what that dining room looked like. The faux mahogany table, the chipped gold-rimmed plates my mother bought at a discount estate sale, and the tarnished silverware she always claimed was a priceless family heirloom. My mother announced she was going to the kitchen to retrieve the main course. I heard the swinging door creak open and shut. A few moments later, she returned, her voice pitching up an octave in theatrical delight. Here it is, she proclaimed loudly, ensuring her voice carried across the room for Maya's benefit. The centerpiece of our Thanksgiving feast. I leaned forward in my penthouse, a genuine smile touching my lips. That turkey was not a standard grocery store bird. Knowing my father had ordered me to drop off a fully cooked meal at the back porch, I had leveraged my corporate connections to hire the executive chef of a downtown Michelin-starred restaurant. It was a masterpiece of culinary art, roasted with truffle butter, stuffed with wild mushrooms, and garnished with fresh herbs that cost more than my parents' monthly utility bill. It had been delivered to their back porch by a professional courier exactly at 10 in the morning. Oh, it smells absolutely divine, Maya said, playing her role flawlessly. The aroma is incredible. Brenda, did you prepare this yourself? My mother let out a high-pitched artificial laugh. Oh, heavens, no. I cannot take the credit for this masterpiece. Spencer cooked it entirely by himself. He was up before dawn preparing the brine and carefully roasting it all morning. He is a man of many talents, Maya. You are incredibly lucky. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, marveling at the sheer depth of their delusion. Spencer could barely operate a microwave without causing a fire hazard. Spencer cleared his throat, adopting a tone of faux humility. It really was nothing, he lied smoothly. I have a secret recipe I have been perfecting for years. It requires a highly sophisticated palate to get the truffle infusion exactly right, but I wanted everything to be absolutely flawless for you today, Maya. You should not have gone to so much trouble, Maya replied, her voice dripping with hidden sarcasm that completely flew over their heads. I am deeply honored to taste your handiwork. The clinking of silverware against porcelain filled the audio feed as they began to eat. I could hear the immediate stunned silence as my family tasted the Michelin-starred food. It was miles beyond the dry, overcooked meals my mother usually served. For a few minutes, the only sounds were quiet murmurs of absolute satisfaction. They were gorging themselves on a $500 gourmet feast paid for by the sister they had just banned from their home. As the dinner progressed, the cheap wine began to loosen their tongues even further. Spencer, emboldened by the extravagant meal and Maya's apparent admiration, decided it was time to assert his dominance. I heard the sharp clinking of a knife tapping against a crystal glass. The table fell silent. I want to propose a toast, Spencer announced, his voice swelling with arrogant pride. I sat up straighter in my penthouse, placing my glass down. This was the moment we had been waiting for. Today is a day of profound gratitude. Spencer began addressing the room. I am thankful for my incredible parents who taught me the value of maintaining an elite mindset. I am thankful for this beautiful home, which stands as a testament to our family legacy. And most importantly, I am thankful for you, Maya. Having you here at our table feels like the perfect alignment of two powerful forces. I heard Maya offer a polite, murmured response. Spencer was just getting started. This has been a monumental year for me professionally, he continued, his ego expanding with every word. As you know, I have been leading some highly aggressive negotiations at Sterling Heritage Properties. The commercial real estate market is brutal, but I thrive in that high-stakes environment. In fact, just this morning, I single-handedly secured a massive 90-day contract extension with our largest facility management vendor. They were trying to play hardball with our accounting department, but I stepped in and shut them down completely. I saved the firm millions of dollars in operational penalties. My managing director has already fast-tracked my promotion to senior vice president. I actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. It was a breathtaking, spectacular lie. He had not secured an extension. He had begged for mercy, and I had personally signed his corporate death warrant just hours ago. He was standing in his parents' dining room bragging about a victory that was actually a catastrophic career-ending defeat. Spencer raised his glass higher, his voice taking on a dark, elitist edge. Success is not an accident, he declared. It is a choice. We are the elite Maya. We are the top 1% who drive this city forward. We belong in corner offices and luxury penthouses. We do not associate with the bottom feeders who drag society down. People like my sister, people who scrub floors, empty trash cans, and wear dirty uniforms, they exist solely to serve us. They are invisible. They do not belong at this table. Only the elite belong here. My father loudly echoed his agreement. Hear, hear. To the elite. My mother chimed in to Spencer and Maya, the perfect power couple. I heard the clink of glasses as they toasted to their own fabricated superiority. They were celebrating their exclusion of me, reveling in the idea that they were untouchable aristocrats dining in a fortress of wealth. They had absolutely no idea that the walls of their fortress were made of wet paper and I was holding the match. My phone vibrated on the kitchen island. A text message from Maya appeared on the screen. It was a single emoji, a ticking hourglass. The audio trap had captured every single damning word. The stage was perfectly set. The arrogance had peaked. I stood up from my kitchen stool and walked over to my laptop, opening the private video broadcasting application we had synchronized earlier that day. I adjusted the camera angle, ensuring the backdrop of my sprawling multi-million-dollar penthouse was perfectly framed behind me. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer and took a deep, steadying breath. It was finally time to execute the drop. Maya lowered her glass. The clink of crystal sliced through the echoes of Spencer's toast. The warm smile she had worn all afternoon vanished, replaced by chilling authority. She studied Spencer, then my parents like a scientist observing a grotesque specimen. That was quite a speech, Spencer Maya said with dangerous precision. You speak so passionately about the elite and high society, but I find myself confused by one minor detail. Spencer beamed. What is that, Maya? If you are so wealthy, Maya tilted her head. Why were you begging your sister for $500 this morning to buy a bottle of wine? The color drained from Spencer's face. My mother gasped sharply. My father gripped his napkin. I have no idea what you are talking about, Spencer stammered. Valerie is insane. She sent you fake messages. She did not send me anything, Maya replied coldly. I was sitting right next to her when you texted her, but since you brought her up, let us hear exactly how a titan of industry speaks to his family. Maya picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and cranked the volume to maximum. The audio recording she had captured earlier filled the dining room. She played a voice memo. I had forwarded her a voicemail Spencer had left me yesterday when I ignored his initial texts. Spencer's frantic voice echoed. Valerie, send me the money. Maya is used to luxury and my credit cards are maxed out. If you do not transfer $500 right now, I swear I will tell her you stole my college tuition. I will ruin you. Just send the money. My father stared at Spencer in absolute horror. My mother clutched her pearl necklace in silent panic. The illusion of their massive wealth was instantly shattered by the undeniable sound of their golden child begging for a handout. It is generated by a computer, Spencer yelled, standing up. It is a fake. Sit down, Maya commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. Spencer dropped back into his seat, paralyzed by her absolute dominance. You love talking about the elite, Spencer. Let me introduce you to someone who actually belongs in that category. I believe you know her perfectly well. Maya tapped a button on her phone. The massive smart television mounted on the dining room wall instantly powered on. The screen flickered, and then my face appeared broadcast, in high definition, directly into their home. I was sitting comfortably in my sprawling luxury penthouse, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the glittering city skyline behind me. I raised a crystal glass filled with sparkling water. Happy Thanksgiving, family! I said, my voice projecting clearly from the television speakers. I hope you are enjoying the turkey. The private chef outdid himself this year, do not you think? It cost exactly what you owe me for the therapy I needed after you threw me out into the snow. The absolute terror on their faces was incredibly satisfying. Brenda gripped the table, shaking. Thomas looked like he might pass out. Valerie, my mother whispered, staring at the screen in pure disbelief. What is this? What are you doing to us? I am taking out the trash, Brenda, I replied smoothly. Maya stood up, towering over the dining table. Since your son loves talking about his corporate conquests, let us discuss reality. Spencer did not secure a contract extension today. He sent a desperate, pathetic email begging for mercy because Sterling Heritage Properties is 60 days delinquent and facing total bankruptcy. Maya pointed directly at the television screen. The company he was begging is Vanguard Facility Solutions, a $60 million empire. And the chief executive officer who personally denied his extension request, applied the maximum financial penalties, and officially terminated his corporate contract this afternoon, is Valerie. Spencer looked like he had stopped breathing. His eyes darted from the television screen to Maya, his mind completely unable to process the magnitude of his destruction. She is a toilet scrubber. He choked out, his voice cracking. She cleans buildings. She owns the company that cleans the buildings, Maya corrected ruthlessly. She employs 800 people. She is also my lead security auditor, my most lucrative business partner, and my closest friend. You thought you could use me as a prop for your pathetic ego. You thought you could mock the working class while drowning in debt. You are nothing but a massive fraud. Maya picked up her designer coat from the back of her chair and slipped it on with elegant, deliberate movements. The silence in the dining room was absolute heavy with the suffocating weight of their shattered reality. By the way, Spencer, Maya said, pausing at the threshold of the dining room, my investment firm was planning to bail your company out of bankruptcy next week. I just texted my board of directors. We are pulling out entirely. Your firm is officially dead and your career is permanently over. She looked at my parents, who were sitting frozen in their chairs surrounded by the expensive feast they had lied about. You wanted to project an image of elite success. You wanted to banish your daughter because you thought she would embarrass you. The only embarrassing thing in this house is the profound, disgusting rot at the core of your family. Maya turned back to the television screen, offering me a brilliant, triumphant smile. I will see you at the penthouse for dessert, Valerie. I will have the champagne waiting, I replied. Maya walked out the front door, the heavy wood slamming shut behind her with a definitive, echoing thud. I looked at the screen one last time, watching my parents and my brother sit in the absolute ruins of their fake empire. I smiled, pressed a button on my keyboard, and cut the feed, plunging their dining room into total permanent darkness. The absolute silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard today. The absolute silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard today. I sat in my penthouse savoring the profound stillness of a victory a decade in the making. 5 days passed since that Thanksgiving dinner. 5 days watching an empire of lies crumble entirely into dust. I sat at my kitchen island on Tuesday morning sipping a freshly brewed espresso. The morning sun illuminated the towering skyscrapers outside my window, reflecting the brilliant reality I had built. On the marble counter in front of me sat my personal smartphone. The screen was completely black, but the notification light pulsed. It flashed with a frantic, desperate rhythm, signaling the total collapse of the Vance family. I unlocked the device. There were 47 unheard messages painting a stunning portrait of absolute ruin. I tapped the first message from Spencer, recorded Friday morning. His voice was laced with arrogant fury. "Pick up the phone right now," he yelled. "You think you are so smart pulling that stunt with Maya? You ruined my holiday, but you are not ruining my career. I am calling my lawyers. You cannot cancel a corporate contract just because you are a bitter, jealous sister. Call me back immediately and fix this." I swiped to the next message, recorded on Monday afternoon. The arrogance had entirely vanished, replaced by breathless, suffocating panic. "Valerie, please pick up Spencer," begged his voice, cracking. "Sterling Heritage Properties fired me this morning. Human Resources marched me out of the building with a cardboard box. They said Vanguard Facility Solutions pulled the maintenance contracts and cited gross executive misconduct. My managing director found out about the fake extension I promised them. I am blacklisted. No other firm in the city will hire me." Maya blocked my number. "My credit cards are declining. Please, Valerie, I am your brother. You have to reverse the cancellation. I have nothing left." I deleted his messages without a second thought. Spencer was finally experiencing the brutal reality he once forced me into. I scrolled down to my mother. Brenda had left 20 messages, each one escalating in theatrical desperation. "Valerie, darling," she cooed on Saturday. "We were all just so shocked by your little prank. Let us put this silly misunderstanding behind us. Your father and I are willing to forgive your outburst if you just call Maya and explain that you exaggerated. We need her to come back to Spencer. Family protects family, sweetheart. Call your mother." By Monday evening, Brenda's tone shattered into raw terror. "Answer the phone," she sobbed loudly. "Your father just received a notice from the bank. They sold the second mortgage on our house to a commercial investment firm, and we just received a 30-day demand for payment in full. We do not have that kind of cash. Thomas is having heart palpitations. We are going to lose the house. You have to know someone in finance who can help us. You have money now. You have to save us. We are your parents. You owe us." My father left only 3 messages. The final one arrived last night. "Valerie, it is your father," he said, his voice heavy with the crushing weight of absolute defeat. "The bank representative told me the name of the investment group that purchased our debt. It is Vanguard Holdings, your company. You bought our mortgage. I do not understand what you are trying to accomplish, but you are pushing us over the brink. We have no savings left. Spencer is living in our basement because he cannot pay his rent. Call me back. We need to negotiate terms. I listened to their panicked voices, feeling overwhelming calm. I did not feel pity or remorse. I replied to nothing. I let the absolute silence stretch out, allowing it to suffocate them, just as their lies had suffocated me for a decade. Silence was the ultimate punishment. By refusing to engage, I stripped them of their only remaining weapon. They could not manipulate me, gaslight me, or guilt trip me if I completely removed myself from their battlefield. They were screaming into a void, powerless against the consequences of their own actions. Instead of answering, I focused on the heavy stack of legal documents next to my espresso cup. My corporate attorneys had worked through the weekend to finalize the execution warrants. I picked up my gold fountain pen and began to sign the paperwork. First, I signed the formal asset acquisition finalizing Vanguard Holdings' purchase of my parents' residential debt. They had leveraged their home to the absolute maximum limit to fund their fake wealthy lifestyle. Now I owned the paper that held their entire reality together. Next, I signed the official eviction warning. They had exactly 30 days to produce the full cash amount, which I knew they did not possess. If they failed to pay, I would legally seize the property and auction it off to the highest bidder. Finally, I signed the permanent termination clause for Spencer's former employer, ensuring that Sterling Heritage Properties would never recover the maintenance contracts they desperately needed. I stacked the signed documents neatly into a sleek black leather folder. The execution was flawless. I had legally dismantled every single pillar of their false empire. They built their entire identity on the illusion of elite superiority, and I just handed them the bill. I stood up, grabbed the folder, and headed directly toward the heavy wooden door. It was Tuesday morning. I knew exactly what their next move would be. Since I refused to answer their calls, their desperation would force them out of hiding. They would march to the address listed on the foreclosure notices and corporate termination papers. They expected to bully their way into a dingy maintenance closet to demand my complete surrender. I stepped into the private elevator, a cold smile touching my lips. I was going to be waiting for them right in the center of my castle. I stepped out of the private elevator and walked directly into my executive suite. The morning sun glared off the polished marble floors of Vanguard Facility Solutions. I placed the black leather folder containing my family's financial execution papers onto my desk. I picked up a remote control and turned on the massive digital smartboard occupying the far wall of my office. I switched the input to the live high-definition security feeds covering the ground floor. I poured myself a cold, fresh glass of sparkling water and stood in front of the screens waiting for the inevitable show to begin. The address printed on the foreclosure notices and corporate termination documents was the official headquarters of Vanguard. My parents and Spencer had never bothered to ask where my supposed cleaning company was located. They possessed an incredibly narrow worldview where blue-collar labor only existed in the shadows. I watched the exterior street cameras intently. At exactly 10:15 in the morning, a dusty silver sedan abruptly pulled up to the valet curb outside my towering glass and steel skyscraper. It was Spencer's car. The vehicle he had endlessly bragged about was looking distinctly less luxurious, parked next to the sleek corporate town cars lining my plaza. The driver's side door swung open and Spencer stepped out onto the pristine pavement. He was wearing a wrinkled suit, his posture completely devoid of the arrogant swagger he had paraded at Thanksgiving. My father emerged from the passenger side, clutching a crumpled stack of papers. My mother followed, adjusting her faux designer scarf, looking around with profound confusion and deep intimidation. They stared up at the 40-story architectural marvel towering above them. The scale of the Vanguard building was designed to project absolute corporate dominance. The exterior was wrapped in reflective blue glass, and the company logo was forged in massive brushed steel letters above the main entrance. Through the high-resolution cameras, I could read their lips and observe their bewildered body language. My father checked the address on the foreclosure notice, looked at the gleaming building, and then checked the paper again. He shook his head, clearly arguing with Spencer. I knew exactly what narrative they were frantically constructing to protect their fragile egos. They assumed the legal documents they received were drafted by some mid-level manager who had accidentally weaponized a corporate account. In their twisted reality, I was just a rogue janitor who had somehow manipulated a company computer to send fake legal threats. They marched past the valet stand and pushed through the heavy revolving glass doors. The interior security cameras picked them up as they entered the grand lobby. The Vanguard reception area was a masterpiece of modern wealth. Imported Italian marble stretched across the expansive floor. A cascading water feature spanned the entire back wall, creating a soothing, ambient hum that echoed through the cavernous space. Security personnel in sharp, tailored suits monitored the access turnstiles. My family stopped dead in their tracks, just inside the entrance. Brenda instinctively clutched her handbag tighter, her eyes darting around the immaculate space. They looked entirely out of place, like trespassers who had wandered into a kingdom where they did not belong. Spencer immediately tried to overcompensate for his visible intimidation. He puffed out his chest, adjusted his wrinkled tie, and marched directly toward the central reception desk. My parents followed closely behind him, projecting their usual country club superiority. I switched the audio feed on, allowing their voices to filter clearly into my executive suite. The head receptionist, a highly trained professional named Sarah, looked up from her dual monitors. "Good morning," Sarah greeted them with polite, icy corporate detachment. "Welcome to Vanguard Facility Solutions. How may I assist you today?" Spencer slapped his hand down on the polished marble counter. "We need to speak to the chief executive officer immediately," he demanded, using his most aggressive, entitled tone. "This is an urgent legal matter regarding an employee of yours who is engaging in targeted harassment and corporate fraud." Sarah did not flinch. She maintained her flawless, neutral expression. "I see," she replied calmly. "Do you have a scheduled appointment with the executive office today?" "I absolutely do not need an appointment," Spencer barked, his voice echoing loudly across the quiet lobby. "My name is Spencer Vance. I am a commercial real estate executive, and my family is being extorted by one of your overnight janitors. Her name is Valerie. She has somehow gained unauthorized access to your billing and investment departments. She sent my father fraudulent foreclosure notices using your company letterhead. If your chief executive officer does not come down here and resolve this severe security breach right now, I am going to call the police and file a massive civil lawsuit against this entire corporation." My father stepped forward, attempting to flank Spencer and present a united front of upper-class indignation. "Listen to my son, young woman," Thomas said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We understand that managing low-level labor can be difficult, but your cleaning staff is entirely out of control. We want this Valerie terminated immediately, and we demand a formal apology from your leadership team for allowing this profound negligence to impact our lives." Brenda chimed in from the rear, crossing her arms defensively. "We are highly respected members of this community. We will not be terrorized by a mentally unstable floor scrubber. Call your boss down here this instant." I stood in my penthouse office listening to them hurl insults at my name while standing inside the very empire I owned. Their arrogance was truly a terminal disease. They were standing in the belly of the beast, demanding to speak to the apex predator, completely unaware that they were already caught in its jaws. I watched Sarah tap a few keys on her keyboard, her face the picture of professional restraint. She reached for the glowing red button on her console, the direct intercom line that bypassed the entire building and connected straight to my desk. My office intercom buzzed loudly. I pressed the communication key, making sure my voice carried clearly down to the lobby reception desk. "Yes, Sarah." I answered, my tone smooth and echoing with absolute authority. "Valerie," Sarah said, glancing at my family. "I have a Thomas, Brenda, and Spencer Vance in the lobby. They are demanding an immediate audience with the chief executive officer regarding an urgent legal dispute." I smiled, tracing my finger over the black leather folder on my desk. "Perfect. Send them up to the top floor." I watched the live security feed. Sarah directed my family toward the executive elevator. They marched with unearned entitlement, oblivious that the private lift required a keycard. Sarah bypassed the protocol, granting them access. The doors slid shut on camera. I walked to my mahogany desk. I took my seat, folded my hands, and waited. Less than a minute later, the heavy double doors of my private suite burst open. They did not knock or speak with Marcus in the anteroom. They stormed in like a tactical strike team, fueled by unchecked arrogance. Spencer led the charge, his face a violent shade of red. He stormed across the carpet, stopping short of my desk. My father flanked him, clutching the foreclosure notices, while my mother lingered near the door, her eyes darting around the office in panic. "Get out of that chair right now!" Spencer screamed, pointing a finger at my face. "Are you completely out of your mind? You broke into the chief executive officer's private suite. Have you lost your grip on reality? I am going to have you arrested for trespassing." I did not move. I sat still, observing the magnitude of their delusion. Even standing inside my corporate fortress, staring at me, sitting behind a custom-built desk, their brains refused to process the truth. They desperately needed me to be a rogue janitor. "I am not moving, Spencer," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "State your business and make it quick. I have a company to run." He slammed his fists down on the polished wood of my desk. "You are going to fix this," he snarled. "You are going to call Maya right now. You will beg her to take me back. You will tell her that you made everything up, that you are schizophrenic, and that you forged those termination papers. You will convince her to reinstate the contract, or I will destroy whatever pathetic life you have left." The audacity was breathtaking. He expected me to act as his personal savior. He genuinely believed he held authority over me. "You want me to call Maya and tell her I am crazy?" I asked. "You think she would believe a single word of that after hearing you beg me for wine money on a recorded line?" "You are my older sister," Spencer shouted. "You owe me. I am on the verge of being permanently blacklisted from the commercial real estate industry. You ruined my relationship with the most powerful woman I have ever dated. Fix it. Call her." Before I could dissect the absurdity of his demand, my father stepped forward. He threw the crumpled foreclosure notices onto my desk, his face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. "Forget the girl for a second," Thomas barked. "You crossed a massive legal line here, Valerie. I do not know how you hacked into Vanguard's billing system to buy our second mortgage, but this is a federal crime. You are committing wire fraud. I could call the Federal Bureau of Investigation right now and have you locked in a penitentiary for 20 years. My mother marched forward, suddenly finding her courage. "You caused us severe emotional distress," Brenda shrieked. "You completely ruined our Thanksgiving dinner. You embarrassed us in front of a high society guest. Our nerves are shattered because of your vindictive prank. We are not leaving this building until we are properly compensated for the trauma you inflicted on this family." I raised a single eyebrow, leaning back comfortably. "Compensated," I repeated. "Are you actually attempting to extort me right now?" "We are demanding restitution," my father clarified, slamming his index finger against the desk. "We know this company handles millions. You clearly have access to their accounting software. You are going to write us a corporate check for $100,000 right now. We will use it to pay off the mortgage you illegally transferred and consider it a settlement for your psychological abuse. If you hand over the check and fix Spencer's career, we will walk out of here and pretend this never happened. We will not press criminal charges." I stared at them, mesmerized by the flawless perfection of their narcissistic insanity. They were standing in my corporate headquarters, threatening to report me for hacking my own company and demanding a six-figure ransom check to forgive me for holding them accountable for their debts. They built an entire reality where they were the permanent victims, and I was their endless supply of financial capital. "Let me make sure I understand this completely," I said, keeping my voice low and lethal. "You broke into my office. You demand I call the woman you lied to and beg for your job back. And you demand a $100,000 extortion payment to save your heavily mortgaged house. Is that the official deal you are offering?" "Yes." Spencer spat, a triumphant smirk flashing across his face as he mistook my clarification for surrender. "And you are going to do it right now before the real chief executive officer walks in here and has you thrown in a police cruiser." I looked at Spencer's arrogant sneer, then shifted my gaze to my parents' greedy, expectant faces. They were practically salivating at the thought of a massive payout. I did not yell. I did not defend myself against their ridiculous hacking accusations. I simply reached forward and pressed the silver intercom button on my desk console. "Marcus," I said clearly into the microphone, "tell our special guest she can come in now. The Vance family is ready for their final performance." Spencer frowned, glancing back toward the heavy oak doors. "Who are you calling? Get off that intercom and write the check." I folded my hands back together on my lap and smiled a chilling expression that finally caused the color to drain from my father's face. "I am not writing anything," I replied. "I am just bringing in the audience." The heavy frosted glass door of the adjoining private boardroom slid open with a soft mechanical hiss. My parents and Spencer snapped their heads toward the sound, their hostile expressions instantly freezing in place. Maya stepped out into the brilliant sunlight of my executive suite. She moved with the fluid, predatory grace of an apex predator circling its prey. She was wearing the exact same striking emerald green suit from our initial meeting, her posture radiating absolute untouchable authority. She did not look like a grieving girlfriend or a woman willing to negotiate. She looked like a queen arriving to witness an execution. The collective intake of breath from my family was audible across the room. Spencer stared at her, his mind misfiring as he tried to process her sudden appearance inside my corporate fortress. For a brief, agonizingly pathetic moment, a wave of profound relief washed over his face. The golden child actually believed his twisted reality was holding up. He genuinely thought I had caved to his demands and summoned his wealthy girlfriend so he could spin another web of lies to save his relationship. "Maya, thank God you are here," Spencer gasped, rushing forward with his arms extended, plastering on his signature charismatic smile. "You have no idea what a nightmare this has been. My deranged sister hacked into this company's billing system and tried to ruin us. I have been trying to reach you all weekend to explain. We need to call the authorities and get her arrested before she damages your corporate reputation, too." Maya did not embrace him. She did not even break her stride. She walked right past Spencer as if he were nothing more than a piece of uninteresting furniture. The rejection was so visceral and immediate that Spencer stumbled backward, his arms dropping awkwardly to his sides. Maya rounded my polished mahogany desk and took her place standing directly beside my chair. She rested one hand on the back of my seat, presenting an impenetrable, united front against the three intruders standing in my office. My parents watched this interaction in stunned, terrified silence. The visual confirmation of our alliance was finally beginning to penetrate their thick skulls. Maya was not looking at me with the pity one reserves for a rogue janitor. She was standing beside me with the distinct professional respect reserved exclusively for a fellow chief executive officer. "You really are incapable of stopping the lies," Spencer, Maya said, her voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "Even standing in the middle of her empire, surrounded by the physical proof of her absolute success, you are still trying to convince me she is a criminal. It is honestly a fascinating psychological study in pure delusion." Spencer swallowed hard, a nervous sweat breaking out across his forehead. "Maya, please listen to me. She is manipulating you. She is trying to destroy my life because she is jealous of my success. She has always been jealous of me." Maya let out a sharp, cold laugh that echoed off the glass walls. "Your success." She repeated the word, dripping with venomous sarcasm. "Let us talk about your monumental success, Spencer. Let us talk about your brilliant corporate strategy." She reached into her sleek designer briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed white envelope bearing the official corporate seal of Sterling Heritage Properties. She tossed it onto the center of my desk. It landed with a heavy smack right next to my black leather folder. "My board of directors had a very long, very detailed meeting yesterday afternoon," Maya stated, fixing Spencer with a lethal stare. "I personally ordered a comprehensive audit of all your active commercial portfolios. We discovered that those massive leasing contracts you bragged about at Thanksgiving were completely fabricated. You have been forging operational signatures and inflating asset values to hide your gross incompetence from your managing director. You built a house of cards, and you thought you could use my investment capital to secretly bail yourself out before anyone noticed the missing funds." Spencer's face drained of all color. He looked exactly like a ghost. He opened his mouth to formulate a defense, but no sound came out. The air had been completely knocked out of his lungs. "Pick up the envelope," Spencer, Maya commanded. Her tone left absolutely no room for hesitation. With trembling hands, Spencer reached across my desk and picked up the heavy white envelope. He tore the seal open and pulled out a stack of formal legal documents. His eyes frantically darted across the bold black text, his hands shaking so violently the papers rattled in the quiet office. "Those are your official termination papers from Sterling Heritage Properties," Maya explained, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "You are not just fired, Spencer. You are being formally investigated. My legal team alerted the regulatory commissions this morning. You are facing severe charges for ethics violations, gross misconduct, and corporate fraud. Your career in commercial real estate is permanently over. You will never work in this industry again. No legitimate firm will ever trust you with their capital." My mother let out a strangled cry, rushing forward to grab Spencer's arm. "Maya, please," Brenda begged, her previous arrogance completely vaporizing into pathetic desperation. "You cannot do this to him. He is a good boy. He made a mistake, but he loves you. You are part of our family now. We can fix this quietly. We have a pristine reputation to uphold." Maya turned her piercing gaze onto my mother. Brenda shrank back instantly under the weight of her absolute disdain. "Do not ever speak to me about your reputation, Brenda," Maya snapped. "You are a vile, toxic woman who sat at a dining table and happily bragged about banishing your own daughter to the winter cold. You paraded around your heavily mortgaged suburban house, acting like a country club aristocrat, while living on borrowed money and stolen tuition funds. You enabled a thief and a fraud because you care more about fake status than human decency. You do not have a pristine reputation. You have a carefully constructed lie, and I am personally ensuring that everyone in my social circle knows exactly what kind of monsters you truly are." My father stepped in, his face red with a mixture of shame and anger. "See here, young woman, you have no right to speak to my wife that way. We came here to resolve a misunderstanding with our daughter, not to be lectured by you." Maya ignored him entirely, keeping her eyes locked on Spencer, who was staring at the termination papers as if they were written in a foreign language. The sliver of hope he brought into my office was completely obliterated. He had walked in expecting to extort me for $100,000 and force me to fix his relationship. Instead, he was leaving with a destroyed career, a looming federal investigation, and the absolute certainty that the woman he wanted to marry despised his very existence. "You thought you could mock the working class," Maya said, delivering her final devastating blow. "You thought you could treat Valerie like disposable trash. But Valerie is the lead security auditor for my entire development portfolio. She is the chief executive officer of Vanguard Facility Solutions. She is a self-made millionaire, and she is 10 times the person you will ever be. You are nothing, Spencer. You are just a pathetic fraud standing in a building you could never afford to buy." Spencer dropped the termination papers onto the carpet. He looked up at Maya, his eyes brimming with humiliated tears, and then he slowly turned to look at me. The arrogant, golden child facade was entirely stripped away. For the first time in his life, he was forced to see me not as a convenient scapegoat or a helpless victim, but as a towering, untouchable force of nature. He was finally beginning to understand that the empire he was standing in was not a computer glitch, it was real. And I was the one holding all the power. I smiled coldly, tapping my manicured nails against the black leather folder containing the rest of their financial execution. The opening act was officially over. It was time to finish the job. Maya stepped slightly to the side, maintaining her imposing presence, but yielding the floor entirely to me. The opening act of this spectacular demolition was complete. Spencer had been stripped of his career and his delusions of grandeur. Now it was time for the financial execution. I picked up the thick black leather folder I had meticulously prepared earlier that morning and dropped it onto the center of my polished mahogany desk. The heavy thud echoed sharply in the silent office, causing both of my parents to flinch violently. I unclasped the binder and pulled out 3 separate, distinct files, arranging them side by side in perfect alignment. Let us move on to the business portion of this morning, I announced, my voice carrying the crisp, unemotional cadence of a corporate boardroom negotiator. You came in here demanding a $100,000 extortion payment and begging me to reinstate a canceled contract. Allow me to provide my official response to your demands. I slid the first folder across the smooth wood toward Spencer. He was still staring blankly at his termination papers on the floor, his breathing shallow and rapid, but the movement on my desk caught his eye. He looked down at the file bearing the Vanguard Facility Solutions corporate seal. That is the finalized termination of all operational and maintenance contracts between Vanguard and Sterling Heritage Properties, I stated clearly. But I did not just cancel the agreement, Spencer. I personally called your former managing director an hour ago. I explained exactly why our $60 million enterprise was abruptly severing all ties with his firm. I told him about the fraudulent 90-day extension you submitted under his nose to cover up your gross incompetence. I made sure he understood that his company lost its most vital vendor entirely because of your profound arrogance. Spencer swayed on his feet, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of my desk for physical support. You destroyed me, he whispered, his voice completely devoid of its usual booming confidence. I have absolutely nothing left. You destroyed yourself, I corrected him without a single ounce of pity. I simply handed over the receipts to the people you were lying to. I shifted my gaze to my parents. My father was still breathing heavily, his face flushed with a mixture of terror and suppressed rage. My mother looked entirely shrunken, her fake pearls suddenly seeming very heavy around her neck. I placed my hand firmly on the second folder. Now, regarding your ridiculous demand for a ransom payment to save your house, I continued. You proudly declared at Thanksgiving that your beautiful suburban home stands as a testament to your elite family legacy. What you conveniently forgot to mention to your guests was that your legacy is currently drowning under a massive unpaid second mortgage. Thomas puffed out his chest, attempting to salvage a shred of his shattered dignity. That is a temporary cash flow issue, he barked, though his voice wavered noticeably. Real estate markets fluctuate. We are simply restructuring our assets. It is none of your concern how we manage our private finances. I offered a sharp, lethal smile. It became my absolute concern exactly 4 days ago, Thomas. I opened the second folder and turned the documents to face him. I want you to read the name of the investment group that purchased your bad debt from the National Bank. You received the notification, but you clearly failed to connect the dots. My father leaned forward, his eyes scanning the bold legal print. He read the name of the purchasing entity aloud, his voice dropping to a harsh, terrified rasp. Vanguard Holdings LLC. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, horrifying realization. He looked at the massive metal logo on the wall behind my desk, then back down at the paper. Yes, I confirmed smoothly. Vanguard Holdings is the private investment arm of my corporation. When I heard you were facing foreclosure, I instructed my financial team to acquire your distressed debt portfolio immediately. They bought it for pennies on the dollar because the National Bank considered you a massive liability. My mother let out a strangled gasp, pressing both hands against her mouth. Are you saying, she choked out, her eyes darting frantically around my executive office, are you saying you own our mortgage? I do not just own your mortgage, Brenda, I replied, locking my eyes entirely onto hers. I effectively own the very roof over your head. The house you used to project your fake superiority, the dining room where you banned me from sitting, and the back porch where you ordered me to drop off your food like a servant. I own all of it. I am your landlord and I am your debt collector. The complete and total destruction of their reality finally registered. The wealthy aristocrats were standing in front of the daughter they had violently discarded, realizing she now held the absolute power to render them homeless. Thomas turned to Maya in a sudden desperate pivot. Maya, you are a reasonable businesswoman, he pleaded, his hands shaking as he gestured toward me. Surely you can see this is a massive overreaction. Talk some sense into her. You cannot let her destroy her own family over a childhood grudge. Maya looked at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Do not look to me for salvation, Thomas, she replied icily. If it were solely up to me, I would not have given you 30 days. I would have called the authorities the moment Spencer admitted to stealing $5,000 and committing wire fraud. Valerie is showing you an incredible amount of mercy by simply foreclosing on your house through proper legal channels. You should be thanking her for not putting you all in a federal penitentiary today. I tapped my manicured fingernail against the final folder resting on my desk. I am not interested in negotiating with tenants who have a documented history of theft and fraud, I stated coldly. I slid the third and final folder across the desk. Inside was a single legally binding document printed on bright white paper. That is a formal 30-day notice of eviction, I announced. The words struck them like physical blows. You have exactly 1 month to produce the entire outstanding balance of your mortgage in cash. I know for a fact that you do not possess those funds, and given your current credit rating, no bank in this country will lend it to you. Therefore, you have 30 days to pack your belongings and vacate my property. If you are not gone by midnight on the 30th day, I will send the county sheriff to forcefully remove you and your possessions from the premises. My mother collapsed against my father, openly sobbing. The theatrical fake tears she used to manipulate situations were gone, replaced by raw, unfiltered panic. Valerie, you cannot throw us out into the street, she wailed loudly. Where will we go? We have no savings left. Spencer has no job. We will have absolutely nothing. You are our daughter. You cannot be this cruel. Cruelty is locking your 22-year-old daughter out in the freezing snow because you wanted to protect a lying thief, I replied, my voice ringing with unshakable authority. Cruelty is mocking the honest labor that kept me alive. Cruelty is using my existence as a punchline for your country club friends. What I am doing right now is not cruelty, Brenda. This is just corporate accounting. I am simply balancing the books. The absolute finality of my words hung in the air of the executive suite, heavy and suffocating. My mother let out a jagged, hyperventilating gasp, finally comprehending that no amount of performative weeping would alter her impending homelessness. She sank lower against my father's side, her manicured nails digging desperately into the fabric of his cheap suit jacket. Thomas stood rigid, his jaw working furiously as he searched his mind for a loophole, a negotiation tactic, or an authoritative command that could magically reverse the catastrophic ruin they had brought upon themselves. But there were no loopholes left to exploit. The structural integrity of their entire universe had just been pulverized by the very daughter they deemed unfit for their dinner table. Spencer stripped of his fake executive title, and his wealthy girlfriend fell to his knees right there on my imported Persian rug. The golden child who had spent his entire life elevated on a pedestal built from my stolen opportunities was now physically groveling on the floor of my empire. Valerie, please, he begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine that echoed off the glass walls. I am your little brother. We grew up together in the same house. You cannot just throw me away like this. I will do whatever you want. I will work for you. I will clean the floors. Just do not let Maya leave me, and do not take the house from Mom and Dad. I have nowhere else to go. My credit is ruined. I have absolutely nothing left. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. I did not feel the sisterly compassion he was attempting to weaponize, nor did I feel the sudden surge of crushing guilt my parents always expected me to carry. I felt only the cold, sterile satisfaction of a fully executed contract. You are not my brother, I stated, my voice devoid of any warmth. You are a parasite who fed on my destruction. You happily watched our parents lock me out into the winter night to hide your illegal gambling debts. You called me a toilet scrubber to impress a woman you were deceiving. You demanded $500 from me yesterday and threatened to call me a thief if I refused to fund your lies. You do not get to claim family loyalty only when the consequences of your actions finally arrive to collect their dues. I stood up slowly from my leather executive chair. The movement was deliberate, designed to assert my absolute dominance over the room. I walked around the massive mahogany desk, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, until I stood directly above Spencer. Maya remained perfectly still beside my desk, her arms crossed, watching the pathetic display with icy detachment. My parents shrank back toward the heavy oak doors as I approached, their eyes wide with genuine, unfiltered fear. You sat at your heavily mortgaged dining table on Thanksgiving Day. I began, ensuring my voice was loud enough to command every inch of the executive suite. You raised a glass of cheap wine and you gave a highly arrogant speech. You proudly declared that success is a choice and that you are the absolute elite of this city. You stated that people like me, people who perform hard labor, exist solely to serve you. You demanded that I drop off your gourmet meal at the back porch because you believed my working-class hands would somehow taint your pristine high society image. You said that bottom feeders do not belong at your table. I paused, letting the crushing weight of his own vile words settle squarely onto his shoulders. I looked from Spencer, still kneeling on the rug, to my father, whose face was completely ashen, and finally to my mother, who was visibly trembling from head to toe. You were absolutely right about one thing, I said, my tone lethally calm and perfectly steady. Only the elite belong at my desk. The exit is behind you. I turned my back on them, walking swiftly back to my console. I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I reached out and pressed the heavy silver button connecting directly to the main security dispatch on the ground floor. Security, I ordered clearly into the microphone. We have 3 hostile trespassers in the chief executive officer's suite. Send an escort team immediately. They are to be removed from the premises and permanently banned from entering this building ever again. My mother shrieked, a piercing sound of pure, unadulterated panic. Valerie, no! You cannot do this to us. We are your parents. You have to forgive us. We will change. We will do better. We will be a real family. Please just give us another chance. There is no forgiveness available here, I replied without looking at her. I am setting a permanent boundary today. You chose your legacy and now you get to live in it. Less than 30 seconds later, the heavy double doors of my office swung open. 4 highly trained security personnel dressed in sharp black suits marched into the room. They moved with swift, silent efficiency. 2 guards flanked my parents, gripping them firmly by the arms when Thomas attempted to shove them away. The other 2 guards hauled Spencer up from the carpet by his armpits, completely ignoring his pathetic, thrashing protests. "Get your hands off me!" Thomas roared, his face purple with indignant rage as he struggled against the guard's grip. "I will sue this entire corporation. I know powerful people in this city. You will all lose your jobs for laying hands on me." The head of security did not even blink, effortlessly steering my father toward the hallway. "Let us go, sir," the guard stated firmly. "Do not make this a police matter." Brenda was sobbing hysterically now, her wails echoing down the pristine corporate corridor as they dragged her backward toward the elevators. "Valerie, please, do not leave us with nothing. We have nothing. You cannot let us become homeless." Spencer fought against the guards, digging his expensive leather shoes into the carpet as they dragged him out the door. "Maya," he screamed, thick tears streaming down his face. "Maya, please give me one more chance. I love you. I can explain everything." "Maya, do not let them do this to me." Maya stepped forward, her expression carved from pure ice. "You do not love me, Spencer," she said, her voice slicing cleanly through his pathetic begging. "You love the money you thought I had. Enjoy your new life at the bottom." The security team forcefully pulled them out of my suite, dragging them down the executive corridor toward the service elevators. I stood beside Maya, watching through the glass walls as the screaming, thrashing figures of my family were entirely removed from my sight. Their voices grew fainter and fainter until the heavy metal doors of the elevator slid shut, cutting them off completely. The sudden silence that washed over the executive suite was profound, heavy, and incredibly beautiful. I let out a long, slow breath. The iron boundary was permanently set. I had completely severed the toxic anchor that had dragged me down for a decade. They were gone. They were facing total financial ruin, complete social excommunication, and the permanent loss of their golden child's career. I had executed the perfect retaliation, utilizing nothing but their own arrogant choices and the flawless mechanics of corporate law. Maya turned to me, a brilliant, genuine smile finally breaking across her face. She reached out and pulled me into a tight, fierce embrace. "You did it. she whispered fiercely. "You actually did it. You took out the trash." I hugged her back, feeling the last remaining remnants of my childhood trauma dissolve into the atmosphere. "I did," I replied, stepping back and looking out at the panoramic view of the city skyline. "And now I am going to get back to work." The next 30 days unfolded with the precise mechanical efficiency of a perfectly coded algorithm. I did not spend my time dwelling on the dramatic confrontation in my office. I had a $60 million enterprise to run, and I directed my focus entirely toward expanding Vanguard facility solutions. However, my legal and asset management teams provided me with regular clinical updates regarding the absolute dismantling of the Vance family. It was a fascinating case study in what happens when arrogant people are finally stripped of their unearned privileges. Exactly 30 days after they were dragged out of my corporate lobby, the eviction notice matured into a legally binding mandate. My parents had frantically tried to secure emergency loans, leveraging every country club connection they possessed. But Maya had kept her promise. The elite social circles of the city are incredibly small, and word of their financial fraud paired with their horrific treatment of their own daughter spread faster than a wildfire. Their wealthy friends completely ghosted them. Nobody wanted to associate with toxic frauds facing federal investigations. When the clock struck midnight on the 30th day, my father was officially out of options. The following morning, county sheriffs arrived at the sprawling suburban house. My asset managers sent me a brief, objective report of the event. Thomas and Brenda were escorted off the premises, permitted to take only their personal clothing and basic necessities. The faux mahogany dining table, where they had banned me from sitting, the crystal decanters they used to pour cheap wine, and the expensive furniture they bought on credit, were all seized to satisfy their massive debts. With zero savings and their credit scores entirely annihilated, they could not secure a lease for a standard apartment. They were forced to rent a single room in a decaying neon-lit motel on the outskirts of the city. The country club queen and the self-proclaimed corporate titan were reduced to living out of cardboard boxes in a space that smelled permanently of stale smoke and damp carpeting. There were no more lavish Thanksgiving dinners or manicured lawns. They were confined to a cramped, dingy room, staring at peeling wallpaper, left with nothing but each other and the crushing realization of their own monumental failures. Spencer's descent into absolute ruin was even more spectacular. The regulatory commissions did not take his forged contracts and missing investor funds lightly. While he somehow avoided immediate prison time by turning state evidence against other corrupt brokers at his firm, his professional reputation was permanently obliterated. He was universally blacklisted. His bank accounts were frozen, and his luxury car was repossessed right out of his apartment parking garage. Less than 2 weeks after he lost his job, his landlord evicted him for failing to pay the exorbitant rent on his downtown bachelor pad. With no money, no network, and the threat of severe legal fees hanging over his head, the golden child had to face the brutal reality of survival. The man who had sneered at blue-collar workers, who had proudly declared that laborers existed solely to serve the elite, was violently shoved to the very bottom of the social ladder. My operations directors informed me that Spencer had recently been hired by a third-rate industrial waste disposal company. He was now working 12-hour overnight shifts, hauling heavy trash receptacles and scrubbing biohazard bins for minimum wage. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting uniform stained with grease and grime, performing back-breaking physical labor just to afford a cheap room in a shared boarding house. The universe possesses an exquisite sense of irony, delivering a punishment so perfectly tailored to his arrogance that it almost felt poetic. As their reality shattered, their desperation skyrocketed. They realized that their only potential lifeline was the daughter they had violently discarded. The attempts to breach my ironclad boundaries began almost immediately. At first, it was a steady barrage of emails sent to my old personal address. My father attempted to use authoritative language, demanding we sit down to negotiate a settlement like rational adults. My mother opted for aggressive emotional manipulation, sending long, rambling paragraphs about how her health was failing in the cheap motel and how I was a cruel, heartless monster for abandoning my own flesh and blood. Spencer sent pathetic, groveling messages begging me to hire him as a janitor at Vanguard, claiming he had learned his lesson and was ready to scrub floors if it meant escaping his current nightmare. I did not read a single one of those messages. The day after the office confrontation, I had completely deactivated my old phone number and permanently deleted my personal email accounts. I transitioned all my communications to highly secured, encrypted corporate lines managed strictly by my executive assistants. My family was screaming into an absolute void. When their digital communication failed, they attempted physical infiltration. The security reports showed that my mother tried to enter the Vanguard building lobby on 3 separate occasions. She stood at the reception desk, crying hysterically and demanding to speak to the chief executive officer. Sarah, my flawless head receptionist, simply triggered the silent alarm. The security guards escorted Brenda out onto the pavement without exchanging a single word with her. Spencer tried to ambush me by waiting near the executive parking garage, but my private security detail spotted him blocks away and had local law enforcement remove him for trespassing before he could even catch a glimpse of my vehicle. Their absolute inability to reach me drove them into a state of suffocating madness. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, entirely cut off from the wealth they craved and the daughter they desperately needed to exploit. They had spent a decade enforcing a cruel, one-sided estrangement, believing they held all the power. Now, I was the one maintaining the absolute zero-contact boundary, and it was suffocating them. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I felt the profound, unshakable peace of a woman who had successfully excised a malignant tumor from her life. Every morning I woke up in my beautiful penthouse, drank my espresso, and went to work building my empire entirely unburdened by their existence. They were no longer my family. They were just a cautionary tale I had already left far behind. Exactly 1 month later, the bitter cold of December settled over the city. But the atmosphere inside my penthouse was radiating pure, undeniable warmth. I stood near the edge of my sprawling living room, holding a crystal flute of vintage champagne, completely absorbing the brilliant reality I had cultivated. The expansive floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering downtown skyline, a landscape of glass and steel that I had successfully conquered. But the true masterpiece was not the view outside. It was the vibrant, joyful gathering taking place right inside my home. I was hosting my annual holiday party, a celebration designed not for social climbing or fake elitism, but for genuine, unadulterated gratitude. The penthouse was elegantly decorated with fresh cedar garlands and warm ambient lighting. A renowned local chef, someone I had hired directly without forcing anyone to drop food off at a back porch, was actively carving a magnificent prime rib at the kitchen island. The room was filled with the rich, comforting sounds of clinking glasses, authentic laughter, and jazz music playing softly through the hidden speakers. This was my real family. I looked across the room and saw Marcus, my fiercely loyal assistant, recounting a hilarious story to the head of my legal team. My operations directors, the very people who managed the blue-collar workers my brother had so disgustingly mocked, were relaxing on the plush sofas, celebrating a record-breaking fiscal year for Vanguard Facility Solutions. There was no anxiety here. There was no walking on eggshells, no frantic whispering about unpaid mortgages, and absolutely no performative acting. Every single person in this room was here because they respected me and I respected them. A flash of brilliant crimson caught my eye. Maya navigated through the crowd wearing a stunning tailored red silk dress that commanded the room just as effortlessly as her business suits. She held 2 fresh glasses of champagne, handing one to me as she stepped up to the glass window. "You throw a vastly superior holiday party?" Valerie Maya said, a bright, genuine smile illuminating her face. "I have to admit the catering here completely destroys that dry, tragic turkey I was forced to look at last month." I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of absolute freedom. "I am glad you approve," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. "I decided that this year we focus entirely on authenticity. No fake wealth, no hidden eviction notices, and absolutely no toxic ex-boyfriends begging for wine money. Maya shook her head, a soft chuckle escaping her lips. It feels like a lifetime ago. My real estate firm just closed the Horizon Tower project yesterday, and I did not have to deal with a single incompetent junior executive trying to forge operational signatures. We completely dodged a catastrophic bullet. We did not just dodge it, I corrected her gently. We caught the bullet, dismantled it, and sold the scrap metal for a massive profit. Maya raised her glass higher, her dark eyes shining with profound respect. To the elite, she declared, deliberately reclaiming the word Spencer had tried to weaponize against us. To the women who build the buildings, clean the floors, and own the entire skyline. To us, I echoed, taking a slow, satisfying sip of the crisp champagne. Maya squeezed my arm affectionately before wading back into the crowd to mingle with my financial directors. I remained by the window, letting the absolute peace of the moment wash over me. The contrast between this vibrant, loving environment and the cold, cruel isolation of my childhood was staggering. For 33 years, I had been conditioned to believe that blood dictated loyalty. My parents had weaponized the concept of family, wielding it like a heavy club to demand my endless subservience while denying me basic human dignity. They convinced me that I had to earn my seat at their table by shrinking myself down to fit their fragile egos. But looking at the brilliant, successful, and deeply kind individuals filling my penthouse, the ultimate truth finally crystallized in my mind. Blood does not make a family. Blood is merely a biological coincidence. True family is forged through loyalty, respect, and shared truth. It is composed of the people who stand beside you when you are building your life from the rubble, not the people who stand over you holding a sledgehammer. The people in this room never asked me to hide my calloused hands. They never asked me to pretend I was someone else. They celebrated the janitor just as fiercely as they celebrated the chief executive officer because they understood that both women were exactly the same person. I had survived the suffocating toxicity of narcissistic enablers and a deeply parasitic golden child. I did not just escape their burning house. I bought the land it was built on, evicted the arsonists, and constructed an impenetrable fortress of peace in its place. I had successfully broken the generational curse of conditional love. I was completely free. If you are listening to this and you are currently standing in the shadows of a family that constantly diminishes your worth, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You do not owe your life to the people who consistently break your heart. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire simply to keep toxic relatives warm. The title of family is a privilege that must be earned through consistent mutual respect, and it can be permanently revoked the moment it becomes a tool for abuse. Do not be afraid to walk away from a table where love is served as a conditional transaction. Step out into the cold scrub, the floors do the hard work, and build your own table. I promise you the feast you eventually serve yourself will taste infinitely sweeter than any scraps they ever threw your way. Thank you so much for following my journey of absolute liberation and sweet, undeniable karma. Please let me know in the comments below if you have ever had to enforce an ironclad boundary to protect your own peace. Share your stories of building a chosen family. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and never forget your immense power. You are the architect of your own empire. Keep building. The profound lesson from Valerie's journey is that biological ties never excuse toxic behavior. For years, her family demanded obedience while serving disrespect, prioritizing a fabricated elite image over genuine connection. Valerie teaches us that walking away from relatives who constantly diminish your worth is never an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You are not obligated to shrink yourself to fit at a table where you are not valued. Instead, build your very own table with people who respect your true self. Have you ever set firm boundaries to protect your peace? Please comment below.